I would like to ask you something about the relevance of the Asia Pacific for Latin America in particular, and possibly for Chile specifically. And of course, I would like to discuss with you about the role of China, which is the main power of the region, and its presence is growing in Latin America. So I would like you to introduce us on this relationship and how they're growing and changing over the last years.
I think one good question is what's the new role, or what's the role from China and Latin America? And for a lot of people, they said China is the new USA for Latin America. Because if you look and if you analyze the role of the USA for the last, I don't know, 100 years, 80 years, 90 years or more, China is now the most important trade partner for a lot of countries in Latin America, especially in South America. If you look, for example, Chile, also Peru, Argentina has also very strong trade relation, economic relation with China. And I have some information about Asia. Asia represents 60% of the growth of the world economy. So when we talk about the Asia Pacific area, or the Indo-Pacific area, Indo-Asia Pacific area, we are talking about the biggest growth will come from China and also from India. So the world concentrates the growth, the economic growth, in this geographic area. It's not in Europe, of course, it's not in Africa, it's not in Latin America. It's located especially in Asia and in India. And I have also here another information that the Asia Pacific region, where the vast majority, about 90% of the 2.4 billion new members of the middle class who will enter the world economy in the next years. So if you look all this information, we can set without doubt that the most important economic area of the world is located in this geographic Asia Pacific, Indo-Pacific area. No? And of course, for Latin America, is China a very important partner, but it is also a very I think it's a new partner, because if you look the historical relation between China and Latin American countries, for example, Chile, it is maybe not a new partner in the world, because for example, the relation, the diplomatic relation between China and Chile, they have more than 50 years, I think. Or 51 years, something like this. But if you look, for example, about the PhD, where the elites of the South American country did the master and the PhD, of course, all these links, academic links, are located more in Europe and the USA. So it is for the economic, but also for the political elites, a relatively new partner, the China and of course India. And the second issue, the second problem that you can find in Latin America is the relation between the United States, the historical relation, and the new relation with China. Because for a lot of things we can talk about more in detail in the next minutes. If you look at the relation between Latin American countries and USA, for example, in defense and in relation with their army, and for example, our relation with technology, with security issues. They are more related, and they have strong relation with the USA more than with China. But China is the most important trade partner. So there are a problem, I think, between who is the most important partner, the USA or China? No? And I think the answer is both. No? And for the Latin American countries, it's a big challenge to have the ability to manage the diplomatic relation with the USA, but also with this new, well, relatively new partner called China.
That is very, very interesting, and I think it gives us the broad picture of the region, external relations. You've been talking about this, I would say, triangular relationship between Latin American countries, the United States, and China. And this is something I would like to ask you more specifically from the perspective of Latin American countries, although, as you said, it is difficult to talk about the region as a unit, because there are many different realities within the region. But my question is about how the relationship between Latin American countries and the United States and China have changed since the competition and tension between the two superpowers has started to increase over the last years, in particular during the Trump's years, but even before that. And how do you think Latin American countries have dealt with this increasing competition so far, and which are the options that are available in this type of condition for the region?
But I think the Latin American countries are maybe between the two superpowers, no? And of course, this relation with the USA is a historical relation, is a very important and deep relation. So on the one hand, for example, like I said, there are very great dependence of security issues, for example. Sales and supply of armaments, technology, and historical, of course, academic relation, but also historical political relation and technological relation. And for the other hand, I think this strategy, China has at this moment a Latin American strategy, and I feel the USA, I can see the US American strategy for Latin America, focus on Latin America. No? I think the USA are more focused on some internal issues, some internal reforms and relations and problems and economic relation between the US American industry and so on and so on. Maybe some links with Europe, so trying to increase the relation with Europe. But if you look the relation between Latin American countries and also with China, China has a very concrete strategy. And for example, they call the strategy, the relation with Chile, a very important geopolitical strategy. Chile is for China a geopolitical partner, very important partner. So, what's the meaning of this? The meaning is, in the last years, if you look the investment of Chinese companies, they invest in electricity generation, natural resources, building roads, building a satellite station in Argentina, and so on and so on. So there are concrete interests concrete strategy from China, and you can find this the same strategy or the same interest in the U.S.-American diplomacy and international relation policy, foreign policy with the Latin American countries. But the great problem is the United States said every week, every month, every day to the Latin American countries, hey, you are part of my world. No? You are part of my traditional partners. No? We are traditional partners. We have the same Western story for the last 100 years, 120 years, 150 years. So all the, for example, security topics are more related with the USA than with China. So this is like a boat in the middle of the sea, and with two very big superpowers, and the Latin American countries have to have a very good relation with China, the most important trade partner, but also with the USA, maybe the most important political and security partner. So it is a relation, a very intensive and maybe sometimes complicated relation between both partners. And the reason is this great problem or great competition between China and the USA about the next superpower in the world, no? Because China will be the next superpower in the world, specific technology, but also military. And USA said, hey, moment, no, I'm the superpower. I am the economical superpower in the world. I'm the political superpower and also the military superpower in the world. So this competition, of course, affects also all the countries in the world, the African countries, the European countries, but especially, I think, in my personal opinion, the Latin American countries, and especially the South American countries, Argentina, Chile, Brazil, also Colombia, maybe not so much, because Colombia has a very strong relation with the USA, historical, very strong relation with the Plan Colombia for the last years. But the majority of the South American countries have this have to deal with this bilateral or trilateral relation between China, USA, and the Latin American countries.
Thank you again, because you've touched upon a lot of really, really interesting and revealing points for anyone as me interested in Latin America. And I would like to remain somehow to the US-China issue. I know your current research is also related to the pandemic and the consequences of the pandemic. So still related to the US-China issue, I would like to ask you about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And because in particular, we see China last year and in the early months of this year has been particularly active in Latin America with its, it has been called the masks diplomacy, and then now the vaccine diplomacy in Latin America. What the United States, as you were saying before, has appeared in a way reluctant and slow to react and to offer support to the region, which is still now suffering very much for the pandemic. So do you see any pattern in the strategic choices made by Latin American and South American countries in particular in the context of the pandemic that might suggest a broad reorientation of those countries' foreign policies toward the United States and China?
And I think this is a very important question because, of course, in Spanish we said, espacio que tú no ocupas, te lo ocupan. no? And I think this is the most important aspect about this vaccine diplomacy or mass diplomacy or this pandemic diplomacy, this Chinese strategy to increase the relation, but also to increase the cooperation, and for other is to increase the partnership with some countries around the world, not only with Latin America, but also with our country in the world. No? And of course, in total, I have here some numbers. In total, according to the Duke University, China has committed more than 500 million doses in the last month, about the more than 300 million in Moscow, over 210 million of the COVAX mechanism. So if you look, there are huge numbers of vaccines distributed around the world, and especially in Latin America. If you look in Chile, about 80% of all the vaccine that Chile have received in the last, I don't know, 5 months, they are Chinese vaccine. They are not vaccine from Europe, Pfizer, Moderna, or AstraZeneca. They are especially vaccine from China. So, and not only Chile, also Peru, also Colombia will receive a Chinese vaccine. Also Brazil will receive a Chinese vaccine. So this vaccine, of course, diplomacy is to fill the void left by the USA leadership, what I said, no? And of course, if you look the impact of this diplomacy, of course, this is not only this. In my opinion, this is only the first step, because, for example, in Chile, they were thinking to create to sign an agreement with the Ministry of Health in Chile, with also with some universities, and to build a very big vaccine industry in Chile for Latin America, to sell and to distribute vaccines in the future for this pandemic, but maybe also for future pandemic in all South America. And this is, of course, a very important business, not only a vaccine business. This is also a very important political issue, and also a diplomatic issue, strategic issue from China, to increase his presence in Latin America, and very specific countries like Chile, Argentina, or Brazil. So I think this is part of the global strategy, of the Latin American strategy of China, and they are very focused, and they know very well the next steps of this strategy. And if you look the U.S. American strategy, they don't have a really diplomatic pandemic strategy. And what the great problem is, what the USA, a lot of countries said, you have a lot of vaccine, maybe you can share some vaccine, for example, with Mexico. Mexico have very dramatic problems because Mexico don't have enough vaccines for the population, for the people. But the USA are thinking more internal. No? The problems we have to resolve internal first, the problem, then we will think global. And China have another point of view. They said, of course, we have internal problems, but we have also our internal problems are also part of our international strategy to fill the void left by the USA leadership. No? And this is the time, this is the moment, no? That USA give us this opportunity. Europe give us this opportunity also in the last years and last decades. So it's our time to be the global, the most important global superpower in the world, with a very strong strategy, increasing strategy in Latin America, in Africa, in East Europe, also in Europe. And if you look at Europe, the Chinese companies has bought a lot of companies in some countries in the European Union. So I think this is part of maybe a new Chinese era for the next years.
You were talking about the void that the United States has left in Latin America over the last years. And well, I think maybe the same can be said about the European Union. There's always been a lot of talking in Europe and Latin America about the potential of the relationship between Latin America and European Union, South America in particular and European Union. And do you think that the pandemic is another missed opportunity for the two shores of the Atlantic to deepen their ties and increase cooperation? And do you see any role for the European Union or any specific European countries in Latin America over the next future, in particular in the context of this superpower competition between the United States and China?
Well, I think the European Union in the last years are more interested in areas like Eastern Europe, North Africa, the Middle East. Also, to increase the relation with China, especially and also with India. No? If you look, for example, the companies, German company, I know very well. I did my master and my PhD in Germany. I very well. For example, the cars industry in Germany, they have a lot of relations and investment in Chinese cities. And except from Brazil, maybe Mexico, and partly Argentina and Chile, in my opinion, there's not a great interest from Europe and Latin America. But of course, there are a very strong historical relation between Europe and Latin America of the people from Italy, from Germany that come in the last 100 years, 120 years, 150 years to Chile, to Argentina, to Brazil. So there are historical, very strong relation. And there are also, now what we are doing now is there are also a very historical, very deep relation in the academic field. We don't have this strong relation and links with the Chinese universities. The Chinese universities are very strong and they increase in the rankings in the last years. You can find maybe in the three most important rankings, world rankings of higher education, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 Chinese universities. But the relation with the Latin American countries, with the Latin American universities, are relatively new. And we don't, if you look, for example, in China and Brazil and Chile and Colombia, also Mexico, you can find a lot of alumni from Chinese universities. They did a PhD or a master. So, and I think the relation with Europe are very important because, in my opinion, they are a very truly cooperation relation. They are in the name, and they are face to face in the same level. If you look, for example, the cooperation with Italian university, with German university, with French university, they are very important because I think all the academic faculty, they feel like partners, really partners. So there are a historical relation, and this is a very deep relation between universities. And this is a very important point to increase the links, the cooperation links between the countries. But if you go to the Minister of Foreign Affairs from Italy, from Germany, from France, I can find a very specific strategy focus for the next years and increase the relation with the Latin American countries. And a good example, I put this, the last days, I searched the Erasmus program. No? It's a very, of course, very important program, cooperation program in Europe, but also from Europe with other universities around the world, North Africa and East Europe and so on. And the funds that the Erasmus program give to all Latin American countries compared, for example, is to one or two countries in North Africa, is the same budget. So for all, if you look the numbers, maybe 4, 5, 6 Latin American countries have the same budget than maybe one country in North Africa or one country in East Europe. No? And this is a very good example about how important or the lack of importance about a strategy, a European strategy with Latin American countries. No? And if you look, for example, in the 90s, it was very interesting because in the 90s, if you look at Argentina and also Chile, but also some other Latin American countries, Latin American countries received a lot of European investments, and they bought some electricity companies and some natural resources company, and they built roads and so on and so on. So it was a concrete strategy especially from some companies in Spain, but also some companies in Italy, some companies in Germany, to have more and more presence in Latin American countries. But now, after, I don't know, 20, 25, 30 years, it's not possible to find, maybe in some specific areas, you can find some European companies that they bought a company in Latin American countries. But the tendency is that a lot of companies now will buy by the Chinese investment. So this is maybe the same situation, but now they are not US American or European companies, they are more Chinese companies in Latin America.
And well, I've got now another point is more related to Chile. Over the last week, there have been the election for the Constitutional Assembly, for the new constitution, and that will be, of course, an important and historical change. My question is related to an idea that well, me personally, but many in Europe and also in Latin America have about Chile, that is the idea of a stable country, a model for stability internally, but also in terms of foreign relations. So my question is, how do you think the current crisis will affect this model? And of course, if you agree with this description of Chile as a model of stability, and what kind of consequences, in particular, the constitutional process will bring for Chile?
Thank you, Carlos, for the question. Yeah, of course, Chile was a model for at least maybe 3 decades in Latin America. Maybe for its long-term project, and they call this all. You can if you read some information or some research, there was a consensus of the elites, and they call it democracia de los acuerdos, no? The democracy of the agreements. No? So it was development model in Chile for the created first by the economic reforms and the dictatorship of Pinochet in the 70s, and in the 90s with the return to democracy. So it was a kind of, some people said it was a consensus, some other people said it was not a consensus, it was more a problem that you can, because the constitution, the current constitution, Carta Magna from Chile, doesn't allow to change things very quick, and this minority of the former supporter of the Pinochet dictatorship, they maintain a lot of power in the Chilean society. You can analyze the situation in different point of views, no? But the most important is that internal changes in the country, especially political, economical, and social internal, they are also now changes the foreign policy like a public policy, because the foreign policy is like our public policies. No? And as you mentioned, the first crisis was this social crisis in October 2019. And the second crisis was the pandemic. And for some people, the second crisis is the crisis within the crisis. Because for a lot of people, they said the most important crisis, social crisis and political crisis in Chile is not the pandemic. It's more the social crisis from October 2019. And the pandemic is more a crisis that show the problems of the first crisis, what the people try to show, to protest all the protests of the inequalities of Chilean society. So for a lot of, if you look, the new constitution is part of an agreement that offered the political elite to the protest. Okay, we understand your message, and now we will have a new, or we have the possibility to have a new Carta Magna, a new constitution. No? And as you mentioned, the new members of this constituyente, like we said here in Chile, no? This 155 men or women that will discuss the new constitution, is part of this new scenario in Chile, this new context. No? And this new context, if you can analyze this, for example, the questioning of the strong classic Chilean presidentialism. No? So the parliament are taking more and more power in the last month. Also the role of the state and the economy. You know, Chile is has a very open economy. Some people said a neoliberal economy, very open, with a very important role of the private sector. But in the last month, the process demands a more concrete role, a most important role of the states and the economy. No? And the parliaments, they began to increase the power, and they began to reduce the power of the president. And this is very strange because, you know, in Latin America, a majority of the systems are more presidential than parliamental systems, like in Europe. No? So the power of the president is very strong, or maybe are very strong in the last years. No? So the big question is, what kind of constitution we will have? We will have a constitution, a short, very concrete constitution like European constitution, like the US American constitution, or we will have a very large and big constitution with a lot of articles and a lot of discussion, and not very flexible. And this is the big question: what kind of constitution will have Chile for the next 50 years, 60 years, 80 years? And in my opinion, we'll have, of course, a great opportunity. Chile has a great opportunity to have the constitution for the next pandemic, for example. I think the next pandemic is the climate change pandemic, and some other topics that we will have in the world in the next years and decades. So we have opportunities, but we also have risks. It's a risky process for the Chilean future. You know? So it's a very important time, and it's a very open question at this moment in what direction Chile will navigate in the next years.
I think we have covered many different topics, starting from the global level, going until Chile and within the region. So I think it has been a really interesting discussion, and I don't know if Lorenzo wants to.
Sure. I jump in. Yeah, I jump in just for a second because I want to thank Professor Alvarado for being so nice and being so available for us, for our website and research center. And what else? I see Gabriele is too. So Gabriele, I don't know if you want to say something more.
Just to say again, many thanks to Professor Alvarado. It has been a pleasure to hear your interview, and we will circulate it among our students and colleagues. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carlo, Lorenzo, of course, Professor Natalizia, for your invitation. I'm very happy to collaborate with a so important university in Rome.